September 9 AD, 20,000 Roman soldiers, some of the finest fighting men on earth, entered a stretch of Germanic woodland called the Teutoburg Forest. 3 days later, they were gone, killed, almost to the last man. But how does an empire forget 20,000 of its own men? And how does a man raised inside that empire become the one to destroy them? By the end of this, you'll have your answer. Here's what Rome did first. It tried to pretend they had never existed. The 3 legion numbers 17, 18, 19 were removed from the Roman military record immediately after, never reassigned, never rebuilt, never mentioned in official records. For a civilization that carved its victories into stone and named months after its emperors, the silence around Teutoburg was complete. Because this wasn't just a military loss. It was the moment the most powerful empire on earth found out it had a limit, that somewhere past the Rhine River there was a forest Rome could not conquer. And at the center of it all was not a barbarian who hated Rome. It was a man who had been made by Rome, who had served Rome, who had been given everything Rome could offer. His name was Arminius, and he had spent 20 years learning exactly how to use all of it against them. But first you need to know what Varus thought he was walking into. Publius Quintilius Varus arrived in Germania with the quiet confidence of a man who had already won. He had governed Syria. He had married into the emperor's family. He had seen what Roman order looked like once it settled into a place, the roads, the courts, the calm obedience of a people who had stopped fighting back. He expected the same here. Why wouldn't he? Augustus had already divided Germania into 2 Roman provinces on paper. Roads were being built, courts were being set up, tax collectors had started their rounds. In Rome's mind, Germania wasn't a frontier anymore. It was a territory still finishing the process of becoming Roman. What Varus didn't know, what someone had been very carefully making sure he would never find out, was that one man inside his inner circle had spent 3 years building something in the forest. Arminius was in his mid-20s, born to a Germanic chieftain of the Cherusci tribe. He had been sent to Rome as a boy, a hostage of a peace agreement, which was a common arrangement for sons of tribal leaders at the time, and had grown up the Roman way. He spoke Latin, he understood Roman law. He had served in the Roman army, earned Roman citizenship, and been given the rank of equestrian. In every official sense, Arminius was Roman. He was also, quietly, building a network of Germanic tribes, none of whom knew the others were being brought in. He was feeding Varus false information, playing the role of the loyal advisor, right up until the moment the trap shut. And the entire time, he was sitting at Varus's dinner table. When Varus led his 3 legions into the Teutoburg Forest in September of 9 AD, he thought he was marching to deal with a small local disturbance, a routine march. He wasn't even in full battle formation. He had brought the baggage carts. He had brought civilians. He was walking into a kill zone that had been 3 years in the making. The Romans didn't die in a battle. They died over 3 days. The Teutoburg was not a battlefield. It was a place built to kill. Germanic warriors had spent months changing the landscape. They had built earth walls along the ridge lines, pushing the Roman column into a corridor so narrow that keeping any kind of formation was impossible. Forest on one side, swamp on the other. A mile-long line of soldiers, horses, carts, and civilians moving through a space designed to make Roman military strength useless. The attack came in heavy rain. Here's what that meant. Roman legions were built for open ground shields locked together, lines straight, the whole machine running in order. Take away the space and you don't just slow a Roman army, you break it. In that mud, in those tree roots, 20,000 highly trained soldiers couldn't fight as soldiers. They could only survive or not. The Germanic warriors knew exactly exactly where they were. The Romans had no idea where anything was. Day 1. The column takes heavy losses. Varus pushes forward. There's open ground ahead, or so he's told. He tries to reach it. Day 2. There is no open ground. Officers are being killed. The cavalry tries to break out. They fail. The column is falling apart. Day 3. Varus understands what has happened, not just as a military disaster. Personally, he knows who built this. He knows the face that sat across from him at dinner, the man who offered advice, the trusted friend who had been quietly walking him into this forest for weeks. The Roman dead numbered somewhere between 15 and 20,000. Those who were captured were killed in Germanic ritual ceremonies. Their skulls were nailed to trees. When the news reached Rome, the Emperor Augustus, the man who had built an empire stretching from Scotland to Syria, reportedly ran through his palace at night, hitting his head against the walls, calling out into the dark, "Quintilius Varus, legiones red." Varus, give me back my legions. Nobody knew where 20,000 men had died for 1,800 years. But here's the thing Rome could never do: find them. For the next 1,800 years, the exact location of this massacre was a complete mystery. Historians argued about it for centuries. Nobody knew where it happened. The forest had simply swallowed it. Rome did try to respond. Tiberius led raids into Germania. Germanicus, one of Rome's most respected generals, pushed deep into the forest in 15 AD, just 6 years after the disaster. The Roman historian Tacitus recorded what his soldiers found when they reached the site: bones, half buried in mud, horse skulls wedged against tree roots, altars where Roman officers had been killed, the torn remains of legion standards. Germanicus ordered everything cleared and buried properly. The soldiers who had come to fight ended up burying their predecessors instead. Then Rome pulled back behind the Rhine, for the last time, and for the next 1,800 years. Silence. In 1987, a British army officer named Tony Clun, stationed in Germany, spending his weekends with a metal detector, walked a field near the town of Kalkriese in Lower Saxony. He found Roman coins, then cavalry armor, then more coins, spreading across the landscape in a pattern that only makes sense if you know what a fighting retreat looks like. Archaeologists came, excavations began, and eventually they found them small lead slingshot bullets, roughly the size of a walnut, each one stamped with the name of their owner: Publius Quintilius Varus. A Roman general had his own name pressed into his ammunition. 2,000 years later, someone picked one up from a German field. They also found the cavalry mask, a Roman officer's bronze ceremonial face, the kind worn at military parades, the kind a man kept among his most valued possessions. It was lying in the soil at Kalkriese, face up, as if it had simply been dropped mid-step. The site is a museum now. You can walk it. And somewhere beneath those fields, according to the estimates, are the bones of 20,000 men who thought they were going to put down a minor local disturbance. What Rome built was remarkable. It is not a small thing that they gave us civil law, that their roads ran from Scotland to Syria, that their buildings still shape the cities we live in today. But Teutoburg is the crack in the wall that holds all of that up. Augustus never crossed the Rhine again. No emperor after him seriously tried. The river became a line permanent, accepted, quiet. An empire that had pushed through every other barrier simply stopped. And the place where it stopped had a name in German: Arminius. Arminius was eventually killed by members of his own tribe, cut down around 21 AD, about a decade after the forest, in a political argument. He never got to grow old. He remains one of the strangest figures in the ancient world, a man completely shaped by an empire, who turned that shaping into the empire's worst nightmare. Tacitus, writing as a Roman, for Romans, with no reason to admire the man, called him liberator haud dubi Germaniae. Without question, the liberator of Germany. 3 legion numbers were never used again. Not because Rome ran out of numbers. Because some losses are too complete, and too strange, and too human to recover from by giving a new army the same name. 20,000 men walked into a forest, and Rome spent the next 400 years building a wall to remind itself never to follow them. If this one was worth 3 days in a forest, hit subscribe. I make these for the gaps in the record, the battles that changed everything, and the people history file